Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. I am Chris Steinkamp, the head of climate advocacy at SIA. We have a great discussion lined up today. And before I introduce Jamie, I want to introduce or to say that we're very grateful that you're here with us talking about climate change. Because as a winter outdoor industry, we have a lot at stake. We are truly on the front lines of climate change, and therefore we have a specific responsibility to help solve it. But to get there in the short amount of time that the science says that we need to be all in on this. But we also know that the challenge is big and often a barrier in the way of real action. But we can't let this stop us. We just can't. And that's the reason why SA launched our new initiative, Climate United, to help our members lead on climate in a way that's focused, achievable, and that meets you where you are. And taking the first step is always the toughest. So first, we're inviting every company in our industry to join the Winter Outdoor Industry Climate Pact. The Climate Pact is designed to align our entire industry on a set of science-based commitments and move forward together. It's a signal of unity that our industry is serious about urgently acting on climate change, and we're setting an example across the industry to the media and to our customers about the level of commitment required to meet the challenge. So whether you already have a climate action plan, we hope you'll join this because it's an overarching signal of unity. Or if you're just getting started, joining the pact is your first step forward by agreeing to a set of commitments that will help focus your efforts and guide you on your way. And hopefully, as more industry companies join, this will inspire others to take that first step as well. And second, the next optional step for those SIA member companies that want that guidance to execute their climate action plan, we have a roadmap for you. And I think what makes Climate United effectively or uniquely effective and different is that our roadmap is a broad, holistic approach to climate action, focused on getting a handle on important emissions reductions for sure, but also working with you to become more engaged in political advocacy and rethinking your business strategy as it relates to climate. And this broad approach to climate leadership gives our member businesses a wider array of meaningful climate solutions to act with, and the ability to act on climate and address climate at the scale required on your terms. And it's free to our members. And this broad approach leads me into our discussion today, a new definition of climate leadership. And so I want to introduce Jamie Alexander, the founding director of Project Drawdown's Drawdown Labs, a consortium of private sector partners working to go beyond net zero to scale climate solutions in the world within and outside their own operations. As the innovation hub for Project Drawdown, Drawdown Labs serves as a testing ground for how the private sector can go beyond a doing less harm approach to one that also brings their resources, influence, employees, and customers in to help address the climate crisis at unprecedented scale. Previously, Jamie led the business policy engagement at Ceres and served as a civil and foreign service officer with the U.S. Agency for International Development in Bangladesh, India, and Tanzania. She has also worked with the UN Office of the Secretary General and Indigenous peoples in the US, Amazon, and Andes. Jamie is a marathoner and a cross-country skier in her new hometown of Duluth, Minnesota. So let me hand it off to Jamie, and thank you all again for being here. All right, Jamie.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thanks for having me today. It's really, really a thrill to be here with all of you. And Chris, I loved what you just said about, an overarching symbol of unity. I think that is exactly right. And there's really strength in numbers when we approach this, this all-encompassing challenge together. So I'm going to share my screen to walk through a couple slides. So bear with me for 1 second. Okay, hopefully that's working. So I want to start today by providing a high-level overview of the solutions that we have in hand to this massive kind of all-encompassing challenge of climate change that is of such central importance to this industry in particular. And then I'll talk a bit about the role of business. And as Chris said, this new definition for business leadership on climate solutions that I think this moment in time is calling for, and that many of you, especially with the Climate United platform, are already leading on. So I'm going to start by asking a question that I would love for everyone to just kind of take a second and reflect on in your minds. And that question is, what comes to mind when you think of climate change? So just take a second and think about what pops into your mind. Well, when 14,000 people around the world were asked that question, 44% of people said that they think about the outcomes of climate change, like changing weather, melting ice caps, or wildfires. 18% of people said that they think about the causes of climate change, things like the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. Only 3% of people surveyed said that they think about solutions. So if you weren't thinking about solutions when I asked that question, you are not alone. There is a tremendous opportunity here to start a conversation about climate solutions that we can implement collectively instead of one that only focuses on the doom and gloom or only on reducing emissions. So we can work together to put these solutions into place in our communities, our businesses, and our industries, and even integrate them into the culture of our workplaces. My hope is that after this conversation, solutions will be one of the first things that come to mind when you think about climate change. And that's what my organization focuses on, Project Drilldown. We analyze and assess the biggest solutions to climate change, solutions that are already available and being implemented in the world today. We published a book back in 2017 called Drawdown. It became a New York Times bestseller. Since then, our organization has emerged as sort of a resource for information and insight about climate solutions. We work with corporations, small businesses, philanthropies, policymakers, cities, and universities to help advance effective climate action in the world. And our latest publication is called the Drawdown Review, which you can download for free on our website. And that's where a lot of the information that I will present today is pulled from. So what is drawdown? Well, drawdown is a scientific term that refers to a point in the future. It's a moment in time when levels of heat trapping gases in the atmosphere stop climbing and start to steadily decline. This is a critical turning point for life on Earth, to one of coming back into balance with our Earth's natural systems. And it's a moment that we need to reach as quickly, safely, and equitably as possible. So how do we achieve it? Well, to reach drawdown, we must work on what we call all aspects of the climate equation. So if you imagine here that this rectangle is our atmosphere and the heat trapping gases that human beings put into the atmosphere every year. On the left-hand side is where those heat trapping gases come from. These are the current sources like electricity production, food, agriculture, land use, industry, transportation, and buildings. And when most businesses think about climate change, they naturally start to look at how to reduce the biggest sources of their emissions, which will lead them to this side of this image. But thankfully, the story doesn't end here. Nature does us an enormous favor and removes about 40% of the heat trapping gases that we put into the atmosphere. And this is nature all by itself doing what it does best. But 60% of those heat trapping gases are left behind. And that's what creates this thick blanket around the planet. Knowing where those heat trapping gases come from and where they go has helped our organization identify a full suite of 80 climate solutions that we can implement to achieve drawdown and limit warming to 2 degrees Celsius or even 1.5 degrees, which is what the science calls for. So we start by stopping the sources of heat trapping gas pollution, and I'll walk through a few of these circles in a minute. Then we support and enhance the sinks of carbon dioxide found in nature, and helping society achieve broader transformations. Drawdown, but there are things that we all want anyway, like more equitable societies, voluntary reproductive health care for women and girls, and high quality education for children worldwide. These are societal improvement strategies that also address the climate crisis. These 3 areas are 3 areas which we must pursue simultaneously. I'm going to provide you with a quick overview of climate solutions that we have in hand today. And our hope is that this mosaic of solutions provides a more expansive way to see ourselves and our businesses in it and how we might act. So let's start with the electricity sector. So electricity, obviously, since the emergence of electrical systems in the late 1800s, society has created most of its electricity by using fossil fuels. And while this has heated our homes and powered our cities, it's unfortunately led to a lot of carbon dioxide spilling into our atmosphere as a byproduct. But we have solutions to address this. And you see in these circles how we categorize the many solutions to move away from the carbon intensive current electricity sector. So shifting production and enhancing efficiency are the two main areas. And within that, there are a lot of solutions. Yes, solar and wind, but a lot of other solutions as well. And a mosaic of solutions is required. These bubbles may be difficult to read, but they're sized to reflect the relative impactfulness of each of these solutions. And again, all of this information is available for free on our website. Another climate solution sector involves the way that we grow and use food. Solutions in this sector are focused on addressing waste and diets, ecosystem protection, and better agricultural practices. A third of the world's food is never eaten, which means land and resources used and the heat trapping gases that were emitted in producing that food were completely unnecessary. Food waste is a solvable problem, and we have the tools to address it. The next sector is the industry sector. So from concrete to computers, the industry sector is sort of the sector of production that makes everything. Solutions in this sector revolve around addressing refrigerants and air conditioners and refrigerators, and then improving material and using waste. Transportation is it's been an incredible benefit for human beings. It's played a critical and complex role in shaping society. However, most of the energy driving mobility has been generated by burning gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. But there are really exciting solutions to this that will also help improve our cities and improve our health. So bicycles, walkable city infrastructure, electric cars, telepresence, they offer an alternatives to cars and to fossil fuel transport, especially in cities. But it's also about enhancing the efficiency of the vehicles on the road today and rebuilding our cities so that infrastructure is equitable. Buildings is the next sector, and this is a major driver of emissions. Some stem from the materials that comprise buildings in the process of construction, renovation, or demolition. This is what's known as embodied carbon. But many more emissions are the result of ongoing use of what's happening in those buildings. That's where we can focus on enhancing efficiency, things like dynamic glass, insulation, and smart thermostats. So reducing the sources of emissions are vital, but we also need to remove the carbon that's already in the air. And this is nature. Nature provides an incredible solution here. Plants and healthy ecosystems have an unparalleled capacity to absorb carbon through photosynthesis, and they store it in living biomass. Land is a critical component of the climate system. It's actively engaged in the flows of carbon, nitrogen, water, and oxygen, which are essential building blocks for life. So you can see here a few of the land sink areas that our organization assessed. So shifting agricultural practices like regenerative agriculture, protecting and restoring ecosystems, and using degraded land. And then coastal and ocean sinks. So some of the planet's most critical processes happen where sea and air meet as oceans absorb and redistribute heat and carbon. Oceans are home to significant climate solutions centering on ecosystem protection and restoration. And this is an increased area of focus for us at Project Drawdown this coming year. And lastly, improving society. Improving society includes solutions that we should want to implement anyway, even if climate change wasn't an issue. By developing a more equitable society with inclusive education and access to healthcare, we can actually help with climate change. So we analyzed two different scenarios. I'm not going to get too into the weeds here, but one of them has us, I basically want to use this slide to say that it is possible. It is possible to achieve drawdown or to stop global warming. So our team modeled two different scenarios. One in which we scale all of those 80 solutions incredibly rapidly and ambitiously, and we limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and achieve drawdown in the mid 2040s. In the other scenario, we are super ambitious, but a little bit less so than in the other scenario, and we're able to achieve drawdown in the mid 2060s and limit warming to 2 degrees Celsius. And I really just want to use this slide to just, dispel any notion that it's too late, or that we don't have the tools to address it, or that what we do doesn't matter, because it really does. And it makes sense financially. And this is where taking a longer view on this problem really matters. These numbers, as you can see, the initial costs, and this again is of scaling rapidly and very ambitiously all of those solutions, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees, would cost about $28 trillion, but would save us total savings of 145 trillion, which is a 5.1x return on investment. And these numbers don't even account for the indirect costs of climate change, like damages from catastrophic weather events, wildfires, hurricanes, healthcare costs from unhealthy air, lost revenue from increasingly warming winters with less snow. So taking a longer view is critical. So if we do all these things, reducing the sources by implementing solutions focused on electricity, food, agriculture, and land use, supporting sinks on land and in the ocean, and improving society through healthcare and education, we can stop global warming. But we need to scale them exponentially, urgently, and with creativity, because climate solutions don't scale themselves. We need to tap all the levers to scale climate solutions in the world. And that's where all of us and our businesses come in. The climate crisis presents an incredible opportunity to put all business models, employees, skill sets, and capacities to work. We need all the creativity, all the expertise, all the hands, hearts, and minds. So let's talk for a minute about the role that business plays in the climate crisis, and explore some ways that you can engage as business leaders, entrepreneurs, and employees. So today's definition of business leadership on climate tends to center around how companies can do less harm, gradually reducing their emissions over time. And you can see some of the many important efforts out there right now to try to encourage companies to get to net zero by 2030 or 2040 or 2050. These are a critical first step, but I would argue that these should be seen as sort of the floor for business ambition, not the ceiling. I think, viewing the climate crisis only through a lens of a business's own contributions to the problem tends to be narrowing. And what I mean by that is it leads companies to focus on a very narrow slice of this whole beautiful mosaic of climate solutions that are available to us. And it limits the number of people who can be brought in to help solve the problem. Corporate climate work has been generally limited to folks with a very specific skill sets who have been doing incredible work, but they can't do it alone, and they don't have to. So many people want to contribute, and a focus on solutions can bring more people in. So this is our 80 climate solutions that our organization has assessed kind of in a different format. And when framed through a lens of solutions, I think this gives us a framework for what is possible. This is where the jobs of the future are. This is where the business models will need to shift to. And this brings many more people in to help solve the problem. So when we think about it more in terms of solutions, then we can set more expansive goals that go beyond net zero. Like, how do we use our business models to help proactively build a world where all living things can thrive? How do we work collaboratively, as Chris said, across our industry with ski resorts and travel partners and cities and our customers to inspire collective action? How do we bring more employees inside our businesses in to help put their skills to use? How do we use our collective voice as an industry to advocate at the local, state, and federal levels for the policy changes needed to support this ambition? How might our business models need to shift entirely toward being focused, at least in part, on deploying climate solutions? And what investments are needed here? Investors are chomping at the bit to fund climate solutions, I can tell you. What kind of financing does this sector need to both mitigate and adapt to the changes ahead? And how can you aggregate your demands for that investment? So I wanted to read a quote from one of my mentors. Her name's Rebecca Henderson. She wrote a book called Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire. At their best, corporations are cooperative communities, persuading hundreds of thousands of people to work together toward a shared goal. Reimagining capitalism requires taking this ability to cooperate and mobilizing it to solve public goods problems at larger and larger scales. So I think, we no longer have the luxury of business simply asking, how can I reduce my emissions as quickly as possible? But we also have this opportunity to also ask this more generative question. How can we use our full resources, scale, influence, the passion of our employees and our customers and our broader community to help build a world where all living things can thrive? And I'll just end by saying, I think so far society has really evolved, somewhat haphazardly. We never really had a grand strategy for what society could be. We didn't dream together and then set out to build the world that we wanted to live in. But today we have an incredible opportunity in front of us, an urgent demand that we radically transform society this decade to address the climate crisis. A huge and growing number of people who want to contribute, and a roadmap of climate solutions that can help get us there. Together as businesses and individuals, we can leverage the solutions at hand to build a bridge from where we are now to the world that we want for ourselves and our communities. A better path is still possible, and I hope that we will tap all the leverage points available to us to preserve our incredible planet for the enjoyment of all people. Thank you.
Jamie, thank you so much. That was awesome. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. I think what Jamie had talked about over the last few minutes was, really in line with what we're doing at Climate United, because what we want to do is make sure that, companies do address the climate crisis on a very broad scale and use all the tools and the resources they have to do it. And what Jamie just spoke about is exactly what we're trying to do as well. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found it valuable. And I urge you to take a look at our Climate United initiative and join the Winter Outdoor Industry Climate Pact. It's at snowsports.org/climate. But also, I urge you to take a look at Project Drawdown as well at drawdown.org and learn more about all of the solutions that they have at your disposal, and take a look at that as well. And I have to tell you that Jamie wrote an op-ed or an editorial piece in Fast Company recently that kind of started this discussion. And we will send it to you in a follow-up email. But if you want to take a look at it, I'm sure it's available online. It's in Fast Company. It's really enlightening and very much in line with what we spoke about today. So thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, Jamie. Please feel free to contact me anytime at advocacy@snowsports.org. And please stay in touch. Thank you again.